Here lies the San Jose Sharks. Time of death, 7 p.m. Central, October 18th, 2024. Cause of death, the Winnipeg Jets power play.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, the Jets have just finished shellacking the San Jose Sharks, and obviously a big 8-3 victory. Lots of takeaways from this game in which, okay, look, it is the Sharks, so beating up on San Jose, not exactly impressing anyone, but I think that there were some individual moments that absolutely do stand out and that are really impressive in their own right, especially a power play that went 4 for 7. You heard that right, a Winnipeg Jets power play in the year 2024 going 4 for 7. If you have wondered if that was even possible in the modern era of Winnipeg Jets hockey, well, congratulations. Winnipeg has special teams again, and we'll chat about that a little bit later this episode. Before we dive into all of this stuff, though, just wanted to let you know that tonight's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I also wanted to, before we dive into tonight's show, let you know that we have an extra special guest coming on next week for probably an end-of-the-week episode. I have 10 minutes with Kevin He from the Niagara Ice Dogs. So if you have any questions for Kevin, I'm not going to have a lot of time, and I already have a couple of questions that I'm planning to ask him. But if you would like me to perhaps, take a pass at choosing a question that you've got for me to run by him, maybe I can get it answered in that segment next week. I'll be recording around Wednesday, so drop your questions below or at me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. But without further ado, let's dive into Winnipeg versus San Jose. A nice little home game. It's Connor Hellebuck night, and the crowd was feeling pretty excited. The Jets were 3-0 coming into this game, one of the best starts in Jets 2.0 history. Believe it is the best start. Haven't had a chance to see where it ranks all time, but now that the Jets are 4-0, I believe this actually qualifies as the best Winnipeg Jets NHL start of any of the NHL franchises. So that is pretty great. Obviously we're not really used to the Jets coming out of or starting the season off on a strong foot. We're not really used to that kind of performance. Usually the Jets have a couple of losses by now. Maybe they have a little bit of a slower start. This team seemingly has come out with a slight point to prove in a couple of areas. I will say that this game still showed some interesting little things going on with the even strength play. This game is a little bit hard to use as a barometer just because San Jose, coming off of a tough loss to the Stars and not exactly bringing their best lineup, missing Eklund, Celebrini, and some other folks due to injuries. It was a tougher game for them to come into Winnipeg and play competitive hockey. You will see that they scored a few goals. I would say not to read too much into those. One was a power play goal, which is the first time the Jets PK has actually conceded this season. But the other two were just off of maybe some fluky bounces, perhaps a broken line change or something. So nothing to be particularly worried about. I mean, it was sort of at the point where the game was already over. So anything that the Sharks were able to nab was probably more of a consolation prize. The story of this game, though, definitely the power play. The Jets power play absolutely ate through the Sharks like it was, I don't even know how to describe it. It was like watching the Globetrotters. Anytime the Jets had a power play, and they had 7 of them, Winnipeg, for the most part, was carving up the opponent. Even when, the Jets power play looked sluggish and perhaps a little bit slow, they still scored. And Cole Perfetti actually notched 2 power play goals, had a couple of points in this game, 3-point night for him. Really impressive. And, Namestnikov also getting in on the action. He had a couple of points. Neil Pionk with a couple of points. The top line on, on the power play and at even strength, had a couple of points. Nick Ehlers had 2 goals. Just a really well-rounded evening from the Jets offense and really from the Jets, I would say, top scorers, right? We've needed to see more from the Scheifele and the Namestnikov lines because that's where most of your high-end finishing skill is coming from. And so if they're not going, it's a little bit of a tougher sell. But for this team, this game was a bit of a, I guess, dams breaking moment. I guess the biggest question is what happens after this, right? Can they keep it up? Will they keep playing at this level? I don't know if the if the performance is something that's exactly sustainable against better teams, but hey, for one night, you don't worry about that. You just have fun. And I think that's the main takeaway from this game is that it was just a really fun outing. Some guys who have been kind of going dry recently got in on the action. You had the Namestnikov line looking a lot more assertive, a lot more like what you would have expected it to. And maybe Ehlers suggesting coming into this game that they'd been talking through some stuff and trying to work it out. Maybe this is starting to bear some fruit. So impressive game. Very happy to see them doing well. And from here, you just hope that they continue to really succeed and thrive and kind of do the stuff that we're used to from this Jets offense. So 5v5, really no problems here tonight. The Sharks were never really in this game. I know that they did score a few goals, but it just wasn't anything to where you'd really break a sweat, right? Like the Jets basically from start to finish controlled this game. At one point, they were out shooting San Jose like 8-0. So Winnipeg definitely just kind of cruised through this game. And I think late in the outing, you did start to see some of the lines maybe get a little bit sloppy with some of the passes and stuff, just because at this point you're up like 5-2, 6-2. You're not really that focused. And so I think, perhaps there was some garbage time in this game, but either way, nice to see the Jets get a huge win. And I think what was really awesome was to see the power play doing so well. The power play was just creating chance after chance. Gabriel Velarde down low was an absolute menace. He, as folks have pointed out on Twitter, really is the best net front presence that we've ever had on this team. The guy actually has such a good move in stick handling around the crease and creating that extra layer of space that it forces defenders to mark him, especially on the power play, and it opens up everyone else. Velarde feels like a missing piece that we've been searching for years, and he has fit the team like a glove. Love him on the power play. He's been awesome. He might not have much in the way of 5v5 scoring right now, but I think that'll come over time. So all in all, really fun outing, big game. And, the Jets are 4-0 now. It's real interesting to see this team in the position that it is. I think Winnipeg probably expected something of a rougher start, perhaps, just because, Winnipeg has lost some talent and it's not the same team that it was before. But if you look around the league, there's not really many undefeated teams. The Jets are one of the only ones with a perfect win percentage, and I think that's really impressive. Tampa Bay has, a 3-game or a 3-0 record. Obviously they're still catching up after the Hurricane stuff. Winnipeg has 4 games, and, the only other undefeated team is Calgary. And we all know that the Flames may have some struggles later on the season, but I'm sure a lot of teams have probably wanted to have the same kind of start that the Jets are having. For one reason or another, they've really struggled. Nashville and Colorado currently at the bottom of the Central Division, both 0-4. The Avs may be about to pull off their first win of the season. We'll just have to wait and see. But otherwise, I think if you're the Jets, you really couldn't ask for a happier start. Once the 5v5 offense starts to get a little more consistent, maybe you make a line change or two, I think the rest will follow. It's one of those things where I keep thinking this team is really close to being a juggernaut, especially in this division that looks like it's a little more open than it's been in previous years. And so, a tweak or two really could change the entire outlook of this team. But one really fun thing is that I think Winnipeg is going to be in the running for the Jennings Trophy again. They have conceded. They're tied for the fewest amount of goals conceded so far. Obviously, Tampa Bay, having played one less game, probably would have at least 1 or 2 more goals conceded at this point. So, Connor Hellebuck, you are in for a ride, and perhaps a third Vezina. So, lots of exciting stuff there. But I did want to give our roses to the Namestnikov line and talk a little bit about their performance tonight, and specifically Namestnikov himself in just a little bit. Before we go too much further, though, did want to shout out our friends and partners at PrizePicks. Obviously, PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action because there's over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to everyone. All you have to do is just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on PrizePicks. And if you're really wondering why PrizePicks is better than anywhere else, they always put their members first. So all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When your picks hit, you can get your money in as little as 15 minutes. And of course, some of the world's biggest superstars are playing on PrizePicks. And if you want to join them, you can play alongside Drewski, Joe Budden, Sean O'Malley. All you have to do is go under the community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the PrizePick community every week. And they even come with injury insurance. If somebody leaves in the middle of your game and you're worried about it, guess what? PrizePicks will actually keep your lineup live. It's great, and they've also invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect, which, given all the circumstances of the modern sports world where injuries, crazy things, all sorts of stuff happen at any given time, not having to worry about your lineup needing to be 100%, whether it's through injuries or a lack of performance, it's just nice, right? You can still cash out, you can still come away with a victory, and that, my friends, is why PrizePicks really should be your next port of call. To get started, download the app today and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Hey, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we're just chatting a little bit about Winnipeg's performance so far and some interesting early changes, maybe some surprises. And I think, the Perfetti, Ehlers, and Namestnikov line had a really slow start to the season. Perfetti didn't really get a chance to practice much in camp because of his contract situation, and so Ehlers kind of tried to do a lot of the stuff on his own. Wasn't really working, and I think Namestnikov had some issues trying to keep up in the first few games. I think this game against the Sharks is maybe is it something where I'm like really excited about it? A little bit, yeah. I think we saw some signs that maybe they're starting to put 2 and 2 together, and Perfetti looked a lot more like Perfetti, right? I think his sluggish start was something that I think on a previous episode, I said I wasn't worried about. I think if it continued on for a few weeks, I'd be concerned. But I think as long as Cole gets up to speed and starts to ramp up and get more familiarity with not only his line mates, but just the feeling of skating again, that's going to be the most important thing. Because in terms of confidence and skill and all that, he's got it in spades. I don't really worry about that. And I think this game was really impressive from him. So overall, really strong outing. I think this team can really be happy. And I have to give, some really big credit and kudos to Namestnikov, who, I mentioned in previous games had struggled to keep up. This game, he looked very comfortable. He was winning board battles. He was creating space for his line mates, and they all looked to be a little more on the same page than before, which is great. Because, having 3 very talented players who, in some ways, are maybe not being used in what I would consider the most ideal roles, it can be difficult to find a way to make them useful out there. And so these guys all seem to be on the same page. They were humming, they were clicking, and it was really nice to see. I think, the Jets can probably be thrilled with their performance. And overall, I came away with the impression that maybe they've turned a corner. Again, it is a little premature for me to officially say that the line is fixed. But if nothing else, one game of big scoring is hopefully enough of a confidence boost to start getting them going. The one area where I don't think anyone really questions this team's lethality, though, is the power play. These guys really connected on the PP quite effectively tonight, whether it was the first or the second unit. Ehlers on the first unit, just really a menace. And it's why I continue to think that, he actually should play with Scheifele and Velarde at some point. I know that it is hard to play with him just because with Scheifele and Velarde, one thing that I think maybe Mark doesn't always like is that he has to wait for Ehlers to find him rather than Mark being the one who's driving play himself. I think that maybe makes him feel like he takes a little bit of a backseat role in some ways, and that he has to sort of anticipate what Ehlers is going to do, which isn't easy. Nick is a very tricky player. Sometimes he can be a little unpredictable, but I think the biggest thing is that of any player on this team that I trust to play alongside Ehlers and somebody who I think is smart enough on the ice to actually keep up, it's got to be Scheifele. Mark is a supremely instinctual, very intelligent scorer, and it just seems like he has a knack for the net when the moment matters most. He seems to find those soft spots. That rebound that he connected on the Ehlers shot the other game that forced overtime. That's the kind of play that I think that they actually excel together with. There's an instinctual feel, a good chemistry, and they just seem to find each other when the chips are down and somebody has to make a big play. So I wouldn't mind seeing them again. I wouldn't really be concerned, if Connor, Scheifele, and Velarde keep playing well. I think this game was really impressive from them. I do wonder how long it'll continue, but hopefully it does. And I really hope that Namestnikov keeps up the good work. I think it's fair to say that he probably won't hit the same heights that he did last year, where he was basically good no matter where you used him. But as long as he is at least doing a solid enough job and he's answering the bell when he needs to, I think that that's probably the most important part. Anything else is just nice to have. It's not necessary. It'd be great, but it's not a necessity, right? As long as he's contributing effectively and being, a capable, reliable presence, both at even strength and on the PK, or sometimes even on the power play, that's probably the most important thing until the Jets can kind of figure out that 2C spot a little more. Lowry plays the second line minutes anyways, so I suspect that probably won't change unless the Jets make a big acquisition. So for this game, I think the nice thing was, late in the game, we actually saw that line out there. I think as a good reward for having had a really good outing, both Ehlers and Perfetti on hat trick watches. And I think Arniel really did take stock of that and decided to make them one of the last lines to get shifted out there. So really impressive game. Glad to see some of these guys starting to find their footing because the Jets really need their top scorers to get going. Even the top line at even strength really didn't score a lot, which is kind of funny because this was probably one of their strongest outings. And yet, for one reason or another, they just really didn't have that many chances to actually pound the puck home. They got close on a couple of occasions, but they didn't really have, I think, the landslide that I think they were probably expecting. Connor did score, which is great. Obviously, an even strength goal is, something that we've all been asking for. And man, let me tell you, he can shoot the lights out of almost any goalie out there. He still has one of the most fearsome releases. It's kind of weird that that line actually hasn't scored as much as it should over the past few games, but hopefully, a little bit of confidence, a little more swagger in your step, and maybe some extra jump in the upcoming game will kind of get them going, and hopefully the top line starts to sort things out. Because again, I think the Jets, with one or two interesting little swaps, could be a really dangerous team. There's not a really impressive playoff field right now. I know it is only just a few games into the season, but I think some of the problems with teams like Nashville, Colorado, to an extent, maybe, there's just not that many elite teams. I mean, even Vancouver has taken a bit of a step back, and their goaltending situation is a huge question mark. So, outside of the Rangers and maybe a few others, I think the field is really wide open, and it's why this year feels like a really good opportunity for the Jets if they're able to reach out and seize it. I will say that I was not expecting them to be 4-0 to start the season, so all congrats to the team. I know that the expected goals for isn't looking fantastic right now. I'm hoping that sort of resolves itself. Defensively, the Jets have been great. They don't really have many breakdowns. I mean, even Neil Pionk has been an absolute menace. So, the blue line unit and the team defensive structure, everything seems to be gelling quite nicely. I'm sure Hellebuyck appreciates having a functional team in front of him. Now it's just figuring out how to get the offense at the best level that it can be, whether it's stuff that you do internally or maybe you seek out a trade at some point as we start getting closer to the deadline in a few months. But so far, so good for the Jets, and they have a really big chance to try and pad, another win on Sunday against the Pittsburgh Penguins. I don't think McGroarty is going to be at this game, which is a little bit of a shame. I would have loved to have had him in the arena. I'm sure Jets fans would have haggled him a little bit, but then after that and after some of the booze and stuff get over with, everyone kind of gets on with it and just has a fun game. And I think you're looking at one of the best defensive teams in Winnipeg versus one of the highest scoring, most prolific offenses in the Pens, and it should be an interesting matchup. Pittsburgh actually just had a really terrible game against Carolina earlier this evening, so I'm sure that they're going to be really pissed off and probably looking to have a bit of a bounce back after an embarrassing first game of the weekend against the Canes. So a lot of interesting stuff, but I did mention that I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the power play in particular. Overall, the special teams have been good, but I think the power play really deserves exceptional mention, especially with some of the stuff that they were doing in tonight's game. We'll chat about that in just a brief moment, but before we go too much further, thought I would let you know about our friends and partners at FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start with the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We are 6 weeks in, about to start the 7th week, and wowie wow, it's been crazy if you're a Ravens fan, some of the biggest, craziest games of the season. Maybe you're a Vikings fan, though, and you feel like the defense is the real deal, or perhaps you are a Jets fan and you're just wondering when the suffering will end. Well, maybe you're watching any of these teams and suddenly you get a bit of a hunch in the middle of the game. You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're placing your bets so you'll always know what's happening and staying up to date with the latest NFL action. That's only with FanDuel. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed as well when you place your first $5 bet. Who doesn't love a little bit of extra spending money to make another hunch call in the middle of that fourth quarter really intense game? All at FanDuel.com, and you can also download the mobile app. It's super safe, secure, and easy to use. That is FanDuel and FanDuel.com. While we're at it, I also did want to let you know about our friends and partners at Gametime. When it comes to buying tickets, we all know that you add a ticket to your cart, and sometimes you get to check out, and suddenly the $30 ticket looks more like a $60 ticket. You definitely didn't buy two, but you find out that you're paying tons of hidden fees and surprise charges, and no one likes that. Gametime doesn't either, and that's why they have an option that you can toggle on called all-in pricing that lets you see your final price with all of the fees included up front. It's great, it's convenient, it saves you time and hassle, and they even have a brand new feature called Gametime Picks that sorts out and filters out all the fluff so you only see the best deals on the hottest seats to whatever you want to go to. I've used Gametime when I was looking for Ravens playoff tickets, which was great. Obviously, the games last year didn't exactly end the way that I'd hoped, but all that said, Gametime offered me a super deal, and they can do the same for you. And of course, if you're worried about it, you can be sure that you not only have seat views before you buy, but you come backed with a lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, and so much more. And if you somehow find a better deal somewhere else, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. It's covered by one of the most flexible customer service policies in the industry, and everyone, just has a great time buying with Gametime. So if you want to take the guesswork out of buying tickets, go with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and be sure to use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's closing thoughts as we're just wrapping up really quickly with some interesting observations about a Jets power play that I think has really impressed so far. I'll have to look up the exact numbers, but I feel like the power play has to be operating somewhere around like 25 or 30%. Tonight may have like really inflated it thanks to scoring 4 on 7 opportunities, which is pretty crazy. But I would say that, like, for the Jets, one of the biggest things that really stands out is that it's just a lot more fluid, a lot more movement. And I came away thinking Winnipeg was just, really impressive with the puck movement and the crispness, the rapid distribution, the quick one-touch passes, the smart passes across the slot. I mean, just great stuff that the Jets power plays of years past really didn't put together. There were some really basic things that Winnipeg special teams didn't do previously. And I know, like, I shouldn't be as amazed as I am at the efficiency of the new unit, just because, like, they're just even making some basic changes to the structure of how the Jets did stuff previously. But, all that said, I just come away thinking, a 4 out of 7 night for your power play is just so awesome. Like, I've been waiting for many years to have a power play that looked more like the 17-18 unit. That team, when you had a man advantage, you just believe that they would score. And I feel like this unit is starting to get closer and closer to that. They're not going to be perfect every night. You'll see some issues where they have trouble setting up in the offensive zone, but when they finally do set up, the puck movement's crisp, the chances they create are super dangerous. Connor is finally getting into more dangerous spaces without having goalies cheat to read them already, because there's actual options and variety. Velarde plays great below the goal line. You've got a bumper that switches between Scheifele and Ehlers, and the second power play unit has even looked really decent, especially if Cole Perfetti starts cashing in. Perfetti looked really confident on his goals. His first goal was a beautiful net drive down the center slot area, a great pass to him, and he just pretty cleanly beat, I think it was Vanacek in net, off of, a couple of, I would say, some pressures from the opposing PK Diamond. They did try to dislodge the puck off his stick, but he just sort of drifted through and absolutely wristed one home. And then the second goal, I think it was a slap shot or something, an absolutely nasty release. I mean, this is just the kind of stuff that I missed from Perfetti in previous years. And if he really does start to get that confidence and becomes a true weapon on the power play, even if his even strength play is still taking a little bit to catch up, having him as a great secondary option on the PP2 unit just gives the Jets so much diversity in their special team scoring. I mean, the power play being good again is such a relief. It's something that we've, I think, all been begging for, but it's actually nice to really have it. The coaching changes really do seem to have made a huge impact, and I've just been really impressed. I think, the Jets special teams have overall looked better. The PK still is kind of at times a little bit in some opportunities, but for the most part, I think that they've pressured more. I've seen more movement, more rotation of the diamond, and it seems like they're doing a better job, making life uneasy for opposing shooters. And really, that's what I ask for on the PK. I know that you're going to give up goals, you're going to give up chances, and you can't be perfect, but if you can at least make life a lot harder for your opponents, that's the biggest thing. The old Jets PK never did that. It was like a welcome mat for opposing power plays, and it feels like that day has finally come to a close. So it's really funny that the Jets special teams and defensive structure are so good, while the 5v5 offense prior to tonight was still kind of a little bit stagnant. I'm hoping that kind of starts to change. If it does, the Jets are probably feeling pretty good about life. There's not many teams that have all four elements, whether it's the power play, penalty kill, even strength, and the special team stuff working all together, the defensive structure, all going at the same time. There's not many teams that have that. And if the Jets can finally find that, plus they have Hellebuck in net, I think that would just be, an absolute peach of a time. And this team could potentially really challenge for the top of the Central Division. Very early to be saying that. And again, I did have some reservations coming into the season about the roster depth, and that may show its head later. But for now, I'm just going to enjoy the ride. The Jets are 4-0. It's been a fun start, and I'm hoping it continues with a big win on Sunday against the Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll have coverage of that game on Monday, and of course, any major reactions then. And then, of course, later in the week, we'll have Kevin He on the podcast. So really excited about that. Again, drop your questions for him in the comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. I thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. We'll see you back here next week with more Jets coverage, so see you then. But as for tonight's episode, that's it. Have a great night, and as always, go Jets go.